So, here's how it all started. My wife, Kaylee, and I had been together for a while before things really started to change. She got this huge job offer at a law firm, like seriously top-tier stuff. We were living in this small, cozy town, and life wasn't bad. I had my job, my friends, family nearby, pretty standard life. But Kaylee, man, she was always on the grind. Always talking about becoming a partner, getting ahead, being someone. And yeah, I supported her. What kind of husband wouldn't? But when she landed this position in another city, everything flipped. She was so excited about it, like over the moon excited. I, on the other hand, felt like I was getting ripped out of everything I knew. My family? My friends? Gone. I didn't say that, though. I didn't want to be the guy holding her back. I mean, we're a team, right? At least that's what I thought. So, we packed up, left everything behind, and moved to this new city. Big city. It was intimidating as hell, to be honest. And as soon as we got there, it was like I didn't recognize Kaylee anymore. She dove straight into work like she was drowning herself in it. Working late hours, always talking about the partners, always with her head in some legal brief. I'd see her at the end of the day, and it felt like she was a million miles away. Meanwhile, I was struggling. Finding a job in a new city isn't as easy as people think. I applied everywhere, interviewed at a few places, and after what felt like forever, I finally landed a job at this marketing firm. I thought, okay, this could work. It wasn't my dream job or anything, but it paid the bills. The only issue? My boss, Trevor. Trevor was a piece of work. This guy nitpicked every damn thing I did. Like, nothing was ever good enough. He'd call me into his office, stare at me with those condescending eyes, and point out every little mistake. I was trying to make it work, though, but it was rough, especially when I came home every night and saw Kaylee excelling in her career while I was stuck with this prick of a boss. It was like a bad joke. And Kaylee? She was changing too. At first, I brushed it off. I mean, her job was intense. I knew that. She was always at work late, coming home drained. I tried to be understanding. I cooked dinner sometimes, even though I wasn't great at it. I tried to have conversations, like we used to, but she wasn't interested. There were nights she'd come home, eat in silence, and then get back on her laptop like she didn't even notice I was there. I told myself it was just a job. She was stressed. I mean, she'd worked so hard to get here. But something didn't sit right with me. It wasn't just the work that had her distracted. It was like she was pulling away, and I could feel it. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and see her on her phone or her laptop, typing away, ignoring the fact that I was even in the same room. We started having fewer conversations. No, scratch that, we barely talked anymore. The woman I married, the one I used to joke around with, share everything with, was slowly disappearing in front of me, and I had no idea how to stop it. It was like this invisible wall was being built between us, brick by brick, and I couldn't break through. The worst part? I couldn't even say anything. I didn't know what to say. Hey, you're acting distant, and I feel like I'm losing you? Yeah, that sounds pathetic. So, I kept it all bottled up inside, thinking maybe I was just overreacting. Maybe I was being paranoid. She was working hard for us, right? For our future? That's what I told myself every damn day. But even with all the self-talk, I couldn't shake that feeling. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering where it all went wrong. We were supposed to be a team, but it felt like I was playing this game alone. And then there were the comparisons. I couldn't help it. Kaylee was moving up, making waves in her firm, probably getting noticed by all the right people. And me? I was getting chewed out by Trevor every day, barely keeping my head above water. It started eating away at me. I was supposed to be happy for her, proud even. But it's hard to feel that way when your own life feels like it's falling apart. Every time I saw Kaylee so focused, so driven, I felt small, like I wasn't enough, like I wasn't man enough. And it wasn't her fault, not directly. She never said anything to make me feel that way. But actions speak louder than words, don't they? She was laser-focused on her career, and it felt like I was just there for the ride. Just the husband who tagged along, hoping to catch a few crumbs of success. There were nights when I thought about confronting her, about sitting her down and talking about what was happening between us. But then I'd see her come home, exhausted, still glued to her laptop, and I'd back off. She didn't need more stress. She didn't need me whining about how I felt when she had deadlines and cases to worry about. so I just let it go. But inside, it was eating me alive. I knew something was wrong, I just didn't know what. Or maybe I did. Maybe I just didn't want to face it yet. Because once you admit something's wrong, it's out there. You can't take it back. And that's where things stood. Me in a city I didn't want to be in, working a job I didn't like with a wife who was slipping away from me. But at that point, I was still holding on to hope. Stupid, right? I still believed that things would turn around. That maybe once she got settled in her job, we'd reconnect. I thought it was just a phase, that the distance between us would close. Little did I know, the worst was yet to come. The holidays were around the corner, and the company I worked for decided to throw this big corporate party. You know, the usual end-of-year thing. It was pretty much mandatory for everyone to bring their spouses. I figured this was my chance to get back in good graces with my boss, Trevor. The guy had been riding my ass for months, and I thought if I could show him I had my life together, maybe he'd ease up on me. Plus, I was hoping that bringing Kaylee along would give us a chance to reconnect. Things had been tense at home, and I thought this party could be the perfect opportunity to hit reset. Kaylee wasn't exactly thrilled about it, though. When I asked her to go, she gave me that look, the one that said she had way too much on her plate already. She said she was swamped at work and had deadlines coming up, which wasn't news to me. She'd been glued to her laptop day and night, and it seemed like all we talked about were her cases. But I pushed her a bit, told her it would be good for us to spend some time together, out of the house. She hesitated, but in the end, she agreed to go. Honestly, I was relieved. I needed this. The night of the party came, and I was nervous as hell. Not about Kaylee, but about Trevor. The guy had been a nightmare since I started working there, always finding some reason to tear my work apart. I figured if I could just get through the night without him nitpicking everything I did, I'd call it a win. When we got there, the place was packed. People were already tipsy, laughing too loud, fake smiling for pictures. It was one of those events where everyone pretended to like each other because the boss was watching. I grabbed Kaylee a drink and tried to introduce her to some of my coworkers, but she wasn't really interested. I couldn't blame her. She barely knew these people, and it wasn't exactly her scene. Still, I was hoping she'd loosen up as the night went on. At one point, I left to get us some more drinks. I was gone maybe 5 minutes tops, but when I came back, I saw her standing there, talking to Trevor. I don't know why, but it immediately made my stomach turn. It wasn't like they were doing anything weird, just chatting. But something about the way she was smiling at him, laughing at whatever he was saying, it didn't sit right with me. I walked over, trying to act casual, and as soon as I got there, Trevor smiled this greasy smile and said, "You've got a wonderful wife, Jacob." It was supposed to be a compliment, I guess, but the way he said it, I don't know. It sounded off, like he knew something I didn't. I brushed it off, though, because what was I supposed to do? Confront him about a compliment? I smiled, made some small talk, and we moved on. But that feeling stuck with me for the rest of the night. After the party, things got weird. For one, Trevor's behavior towards me at work completely shifted. The guy who used to criticize every little thing I did suddenly became my biggest fan. He stopped nitpicking my reports and even started praising my ideas in meetings. It was like I could do no wrong in his eyes. One day, out of nowhere, he called me into his office and offered me a promotion. Just like that, I should have been over the moon. I should have been celebrating. But instead, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The promotion felt too easy, too convenient. I knew I hadn't done anything special to deserve it. But instead of looking into it deeper, I let myself get blinded by the success. After months of busting my ass and feeling like I was drowning in this job, I was finally getting recognized. For the first time since we moved to this city, things were looking up for me. I convinced myself that I deserved this. I'd worked hard, and I'd earned it, right? But even as my career was taking off, things with Kaylee kept going downhill. She was pulling away from me, more than ever. She stopped telling me about her day, about the cases she was working on. Whenever I'd ask her how things were going, she'd give me these short, vague answers, like she didn't want to talk to me anymore. And it wasn't just the conversations that were drying up. Our whole relationship felt like it was slipping away. She spent more and more time at work, and when she was home, she was glued to her phone or her laptop. Some nights, she wouldn't even bother coming to bed until after midnight. When I tried to bring it up, she'd brush me off, saying she was busy, that I was overthinking things. But I wasn't overthinking it. Something was off. I just didn't know what. I tried telling myself that this was just a rough patch, that she was stressed and that it would pass. But no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, there was this nagging voice in the back of my head telling me that things weren't okay, that something had changed between us, and it wasn't just the job. Maybe it was the way Trevor's eyes lingered on her at the party. Maybe it was the way Kaylee had been acting distant ever since. I didn't know what it was exactly, but I knew that something was wrong. I didn't have proof. I didn't have any real reason to doubt her. But that feeling in my gut, it wouldn't go away. Every time she stayed late at work, every time she avoided my questions, that feeling got stronger. I tried to push it down, tried to focus on my new promotion and the fact that things were finally going well for me at work. But no matter what I did, I couldn't get rid of that gnawing doubt. And here's the thing, when you start doubting someone you love, it eats away at you. It's like a poison, spreading through everything. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering where she was, what she was doing, who she was with. I'd hear her phone buzz in the middle of the night and wonder if it was a work email or something else. I hated myself for thinking like that, but I couldn't stop. The worst part? I didn't know how to confront her. I didn't have anything solid to go on. If I asked her outright, she'd just say I was being paranoid. And maybe I was, but that feeling wouldn't leave me alone. So I stayed quiet. I told myself it was just a rough patch, that it would pass. I focused on my job, on the promotion, on anything that would take my mind off the doubts. But no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, the distance between us kept growing, and I knew, deep down, that things were about to get a lot worse. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought inviting Trevor and his wife, Melissa, over for dinner was going to clear up the tension I'd been feeling for weeks. I mean, how else could I ease my doubts, right? If I could get Trevor in my house, watch him interact with Kaylee, maybe I'd see that I was just being paranoid. Plus, it was an opportunity to strengthen my relationship with my boss. If I could keep things professional and smooth at work, maybe everything else would fall into place. Kaylee wasn't thrilled about hosting. "You know how busy I am, Jacob," she said with that tone, the one that made it seem like I was the unreasonable one. But I convinced her. I needed this dinner to happen. The night of the dinner came, and it all felt normal at first. I greeted Trevor and Melissa at the door, trying to act casual, like I wasn't internally calculating every glance, every word exchanged. Kaylee was playing the perfect hostess, all smiles, setting up drinks, making small talk with Melissa. For a brief moment, I let myself believe that everything was okay, that I was just being ridiculous. But then, as dinner went on, I started noticing things. It was subtle, but I wasn't imagining it. Every now and then, Trevor would glance at Kaylee, not in a normal, friendly way, but with this look, like they shared some kind of inside joke, something they didn't need to say out loud. And Kaylee, she wasn't exactly shy about it either. Their conversations flowed too easily, like they were in sync in a way that made my stomach churn. They found every opportunity to steer the conversation back to each other, talking about work, cases, their mutual ambitions. Melissa and I were just there like background noise. I tried to brush it off. I kept telling myself it was all in my head. I mean, it wasn't like I had proof of anything. But as the night went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. After Trevor and Melissa left, I asked Kaylee how she thought the evening went. She gave me a half-hearted "it was fine," then went straight back to her laptop like nothing happened. I sat there for a while, staring at her, trying to figure out what was real and what wasn't. She was right there, in front of me, but it felt like she was already gone. I could feel it slipping away, the trust, the connection, everything. A few days later, Trevor didn't show up to work. Normally, I wouldn't have thought much of it, but my mind was already in overdrive. I sent him a quick email about some project details, but no response. Around lunchtime, I realized I'd forgotten that it was my turn to pick up our daughter from school. With work piling up, I tried calling Kaylee, thinking maybe she could grab her instead. I dialed her number and waited. Nothing. No answer. I called again. Voicemail. That gnawing feeling, the one I had been pushing down for weeks, came flooding back. It hit me like a punch in the gut. My head started spinning with thoughts I didn't want to think, and my heart raced like I was on the verge of something I couldn't come back from. When I got home that evening, Kaylee was already in bed. Our daughter was asleep, and the house was quiet. But I wasn't. My mind was loud, chaotic, filled with the worst possible scenarios. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know. I needed to stop wondering and find out once and for all what was going on. I walked into our bedroom, my heart pounding. Kaylee was asleep, her phone charging on the nightstand. I stood there for what felt like forever, staring at the phone, my hands shaking. I had never done this before. I had never even thought about invading her privacy like this. But something inside me snapped. I had to know. I grabbed her phone, unlocked it, and went straight to her messages. My hands were trembling so much I could barely hold the damn thing. And then there it was. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened as I scrolled through the text between her and Trevor. Flirty, explicit, cruel. They weren't just chatting. They were talking about me. Trevor had the nerve to call me a loser, like I was some clueless idiot who didn't deserve my own wife. And Kaylee, she didn't even defend me. In fact, she laughed about it, joked about how easy it was to hide everything from me. Trevor boasted about how good it felt to be with her, how they had to be careful because of the firm, but that it was worth the risk. Kaylee responded with emojis, flirtatious messages, things that made my stomach turn. The world around me collapsed in that moment. I felt like the ground was falling away, and I was free-falling, helpless. I had been a fool. All those months, all those little doubts I'd pushed aside, they were right. I had been right. And now, here it was, right in front of me, undeniable proof that the woman I loved, the woman I gave up everything for, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I wanted to scream. I wanted to wake her up and demand answers. I wanted to throw her phone against the wall, shatter it into 1,000 pieces, just like she had shattered my trust. But something stopped me. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was the need for control. I don't know what it was, but instead of confronting her right then and there, I decided to play it smart. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I put her phone back, just the way I found it, and quietly left the room. My heart was still racing, but now it wasn't just hurt or anger. It was something darker, something that whispered, "Don't show your hand just yet." I needed time. I needed a plan. Because if Kaylee thought she could get away with this, if Trevor thought he could humiliate me like this, they were both in for a rude awakening. I went back downstairs, my mind already turning over possibilities, thinking about what I'd do next. I wasn't going to be the guy they laughed at. I wasn't going to sit back and let them play me for a fool. No, I was going to make them regret it. The morning after I found those texts, I sat there in the kitchen, staring at my coffee like it was going to give me some kind of answer. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. Part of me wanted to confront Kaylee right away, scream at her, throw everything out in the open. But that wouldn't solve anything. It'd just give her and Trevor a chance to spin their lies, cover their tracks. I needed something bigger, something that would leave no room for them to wriggle out. That's when I thought of Melissa, Trevor's wife. If I was going to take these two down, I couldn't do it alone. I needed someone who had just as much at stake as I did. And Melissa? She had no idea what was going on behind her back. Or at least, that's what I thought at the time. I sent her a message that morning, asking if we could meet up. I kept it vague, just saying it was about work. She agreed, probably thinking I wanted to talk about Trevor or the office or something equally boring. We arranged to meet at this quiet cafe downtown, somewhere out of the way, where we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. The last thing I needed was for this to get back to Kaylee before I was ready. When I got there, Melissa was already sitting at a small table by the window, looking as put together as ever. She was one of those women who always looked like she had her life in order. But when I sat down and looked her in the eye, I could tell she was already on edge. Maybe she had sensed something, the way we all do when something is off in our marriages. But what I was about to show her would blow everything wide open. "Thanks for meeting me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. My hands were shaking under the table. This was it. Once I started, there was no going back. She smiled politely, but there was confusion in her eyes. "Of course. Is everything okay?" I didn't waste any time. I pulled out my phone, opened the messages, and slid it across the table. "You need to see this." She glanced down, her brow furrowing as she scrolled through the texts. At first, she didn't react. It was like her brain couldn't process what she was seeing. But then her face changed, shock, hurt, then anger. Pure Roanje. He's been with her, she said, her voice barely a whisper. She looked up at me, her eyes filling with tears. How long has this been going on? I shook my head. I don't know. But I've got proof now. She sat back in her chair, blinking hard as if she was trying to stop herself from breaking down right there in the cafe. I always had a feeling, she admitted after a long pause. Trevor's been distant for months, but I never had any proof. Until now. There was a long, heavy silence between us. It wasn't the awkward kind, but the kind where two people are trying to figure out how to move forward from something that just shattered their world. And then something shifted. I saw it in her eyes. The same look I had felt inside me the night before when I decided I wasn't just going to sit back and let this happen. She wasn't just sad anymore. She was angry, furious. We can't let them get away with this, she said, her voice low but firm. I nodded, my own anger bubbling back to the surface. I've been thinking the same thing. We need a plan. That's when she suggested it. The hidden cameras. It was a brilliant idea. They thought they were being so sneaky, carrying on their little affair behind our backs. But if we could catch them in the act, we'd have irrefutable proof. Not just some texts, but undeniable, concrete evidence. We'll install cameras in both houses, Melissa said, her voice taking on a sharp edge. In our bedrooms. That's where they think they can get away with it, where they feel safe. We'll catch them there. I was all in. This wasn't just about confronting Kaylee anymore. This was about taking control, about making sure they couldn't lie their way out of it. It wasn't going to be easy, but I didn't care. They had betrayed us, humiliated us, and we were going to make sure they paid for it. We spent the rest of the day planning everything down to the smallest detail. We went out that afternoon and bought the cameras, tiny, discreet, easy to hide. Melissa was cold and calculating as we discussed the plan, and I knew she was just as determined as I was. Maybe even more so. Later that night, I installed the camera in our bedroom. I felt sick doing it, but there was no other way. Every part of me hated that it had come to this, spying on my own wife in our home, but I knew it was the only way to get the proof I needed. I kept my cool around Kaylee, pretending everything was normal, even though inside, I was boiling with rage. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Every night, I'd go to bed wondering if tonight would be the night they slipped up. I had to act like nothing was wrong. Had to keep up the facade, all while knowing that any moment could bring the final blow to my marriage. Melissa and I kept in touch, updating each other on any small details, but mostly we waited. And waited. It was torture. But then, finally it happened. One night, after weeks of tense silence, I got the notification on my phone from the camera. Kaylee was home, but I wasn't. My heart raced as I opened the app and saw them. Kaylee and Trevor, together in our bedroom. I couldn't watch for long. It was too much, but I didn't need to. I had all the proof I needed. I called Melissa immediately. She was already checking her own cameras, and sure enough, Trevor had been at their house the same day, sneaking around with Kaylee in their bedroom too. It was almost poetic in a twisted, disgusting way. We met up the next day, this time in the same cafe, but everything felt different. We weren't just the betrayed spouses anymore. We were partners, co-conspirators. We had the proof, and now it was time to decide what to do with it. I've got the footage, I said, sliding my phone across the table once again. Melissa nodded, her expression hard. So do I. Now what? I leaned back, taking a deep breath. Now, we make them regret ever thinking they could get away with this. We spent hours going over the plan. There were a million ways this could go wrong, but at that point I didn't care. I was past the point of thinking rationally. I wanted revenge, and I wanted them to feel every ounce of the pain they had caused us. We left the cafe that day with a clear goal. This wasn't going to be pretty, but it was necessary. They had betrayed us, destroyed everything we thought we had, and now they were going to face the consequences. The hotel room felt cold, even though it was just another generic business suite with neutral decor and the faint smell of fresh linens. I wasn't sure what I expected when Melissa suggested we meet here, but we both knew it was neutral ground. Too many emotions were tied to our homes, and we needed somewhere detached from the chaos to think clearly. Or at least that was the plan. Melissa sat across from me, The weight of everything we'd been through hanging between us like a storm cloud ready to burst. We had it all now. The footage, the proof. It was only a matter of time before Kaylee and Trevor would face the consequences. Melissa poured us both a drink, whiskey, no ice. I wasn't a big drinker, but right then it felt like a necessary escape. To freedom, Melissa said, raising her glass, her eyes glinting with something I hadn't seen in her before. It wasn't joy or relief. It was something darker, vindication maybe, but also pain, raw and deep. To freedom, I echoed, though the word felt hollow. I couldn't quite believe it. Sure, I wanted out of this mess, out of the betrayal, but the idea of freedom still seemed distant. The drinks burned going down, but I barely noticed. We talked for a while, going over our plan one last time. The videos would be sent out anonymously, uploaded to a secure site, and shared with just the right people. It wouldn't take long for it to spread, and soon, Trevor and Kaylee's dirty little secret would be out in the open for everyone to see. There was no coming back from this. Their careers, their reputations, everything they'd built was about to crumble, just like they had done to us. As we spoke, though, something started to shift. The whiskey blurred the edges of my thoughts, and I could feel the tension between Melissa and me change. It wasn't just the shared anger or the need for revenge anymore. It was something deeper, something primal. We poured another round of drinks, then another. I wasn't counting anymore, and neither was she. We were both running on fumes. Months of betrayal, humiliation, and frustration boiling beneath the surface. The alcohol brought it all to the forefront, making us raw and exposed. I could see it in her eyes, that familiar mix of hurt and anger, and I knew she saw it in mine too. At some point, Melissa moved closer. Her knee brushed against mine under the table, and I didn't pull away. I should have. Every rational part of me knew I should have stepped back, but instead, I stayed. I stayed because in that moment, I wasn't thinking about right or wrong. I was thinking about everything I had lost. I was thinking about how Kaylee had destroyed everything we had built together, how she had turned me into a joke, how she had chosen someone else. I was thinking about how, in the end, maybe I deserved a little something for myself, too. Melissa leaned in, her voice low. "We've both been through hell," she said, her breath warm against my ear. Maybe we deserve something better." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind was spinning, and I wasn't sure if it was the alcohol or the reality of what she was suggesting. I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me. But before I could stop myself, I heard my own voice, small, almost distant, say, "Maybe we do." She kissed me. It was quick, hesitant at first, but then it deepened, fueled by all the pain and anger we had been holding on to for so long. It wasn't love, not even close. It was something darker, revenge maybe, or just the need to feel something other than the hollow emptiness we had both been living with. For a brief moment, I pulled away. I wasn't sure if it was guilt or the last sliver of morality left in me, but I hesitated. "Melissa, we shouldn't." She cut me off with a whisper. "They did this to us, Jacob. They made us feel like this. We deserve this." And she was right, wasn't she? They had destroyed us. They had taken everything we had, everything we believed in, and burned it to the ground. So why shouldn't we do the same? Why shouldn't we take something for ourselves, just this once? Before I could overthink it, I grabbed my phone, opened the app, and pressed the button that would release the videos. With one click, everything changed. The footage of Kaylee and Trevor, caught red-handed, was uploaded, sent to the world. There was no going back now. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction wash over me. They were going to pay. And then I let it happen. Melissa and we crossed that line. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't tender. It was angry, desperate, and filled with the kind of betrayal we had both been drowning in for months. I wasn't thinking about the consequences, not in that moment. All I cared about was how it felt to finally take something back after having so much taken from me. When it was over, the room was silent. Melissa lay beside me, her breathing heavy, but neither of us spoke. There was no need. We both knew what had just happened, and we both knew that it wasn't about us. It was about them, Kaylee and Trevor. We had taken something back, but at what cost? The next morning, the fallout began. The video spread faster than I could have imagined. I hadn't even considered how quickly something like that could go viral, but it did. By midday, everyone in the office knew. People were whispering, glancing at Trevor when he wasn't looking, smirking behind their hands. Kaylee, too, was feeling the heat. Her colleagues were cold, distant, treating her like she was something dirty, something that needed to be scrubbed away. Trevor was the first to crack. The company couldn't afford the scandal, not with a guy like him at the center of it. They fired him quietly, but everyone knew what had happened. His reputation was in tatters. Kaylee, too, started to feel the consequences. The partners at her firm couldn't ignore what had happened. She wasn't just an associate anymore. She was the woman who had cheated with another man, a man who had been exposed in the most humiliating way possible. Their careers were crumbling, just like their lives. And me? I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt like I had finally won. But as I sat there, watching everything unfold, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe I had crossed a line too. Maybe, in trying to get my revenge, I had become something I didn't recognize. I wasn't just a betrayed husband anymore. I was something darker, something colder. And as I looked over at Melissa, who sat beside me, staring blankly at her phone, I realized that revenge doesn't heal anything. It doesn't fill the emptiness left behind by betrayal. It just leaves you with the ashes of everything you once thought you were. When I walked through the door that night, Kaylee was already waiting, pacing in the living room. She looked frantic, eyes wide, and the second she saw me, she exploded. "Why, Jacob? Why would you do this?" she shouted, her voice cracking under the weight of her anger. I stared at her, feeling nothing but disgust. "Why? You cheated, Kaylee. You think you can just walk all over me, and I'm supposed to take it?" Her face twisted with frustration, and she flung her hands up as if trying to piece together a defense. "I didn't do it to hurt you. I did it for us, for you. Trevor had influence, and I thought if I kept him happy, it would help your career." I could barely believe what I was hearing. "Are you serious? You slept with my boss because you thought it would help me? You're a fool, Kaylee. Nothing justifies what you did. You're pathetic if you think that's an excuse." Her tears started to fall, but I felt nothing. No sympathy. No pity. Only a cold realization that this marriage was beyond repair. That was the breaking point. The divorce process was swift and emotionless. We sold the house, divided the assets, and signed the papers. Once it was done, I packed up my things and left the city. There was no reason to stay. I needed a fresh start, so I moved back to my hometown where my old friends were, where I could reconnect with the life I'd left behind. Returning to my roots felt like the first breath of fresh air after months of suffocating. I went back to my old job. Nothing glamorous, but it was honest work. I got back into a routine, started hitting the gym again, spent more time with friends, and slowly began to feel like myself. It took time, but the pain of the betrayal faded. The memories of what Kaylee had done, the humiliation, the anger, it all became less important. I wasn't bitter anymore. I was just ready to move on. I realized that holding on to all that pain wasn't going to help me, so I let it go. In my new life, I found peace. There were no more secrets, no more lies. I had learned a hard lesson, but it made me stronger. Kaylee was just a chapter of my life that had ended, and I was ready for a new beginning. And for the first time in a long time, I was truly free.